First item on the agenda is election of chair. Do I have any nominations, please?
I nominate Councillor Massoud.
Is that seconded? Are there any other nominations, please? In that case, Councillor Massoud, would you like to take the chair, please?
Thank you very much once again, choosing me as a chair. Thank you. We go on to the agenda item 2, appointment of the vice chair. Do I have any nominations for the vice chair? Yes, sir.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Sawyer.
Councillor Sawyer, seconded? Seconded. Right. Congratulations, Councillor Sawyer. Agenda item 3, question from the members of the public and members of the council. No? Right. Agenda item 4, apologies for absence.
As in the previous meeting, Councillor Gamble gives apologies for his absence. I am substituting for him.
Yes, Councillor.
And as per the previous meeting, I'm afraid I will have to leave early to attend a meeting in Great Barford.
Okay. Right. Agenda item 5, minutes of the last meeting. Does the committee approve the minutes of the meeting held on 17th of March 2026 as a correct record and authorize me to sign them? Yeah, thank you. Agenda item 6. Disclosure of local and or disclosable pecuniary interest. As I member appreciate, it is important that we observe the provision of the Code of Conduct relating to the disclosure of interest. Can I ask members to disclose these interests and the existence and nature of any local and or disclosable pecuniary interest in tonight's business? No? Okay. Thank you. That's right. So can we bring the agenda 12 onto this one? Next. The agenda item number 12, Annual Internal Audit Report 2025-2026. Please could I ask Surinder Momi, Head of the Audit, to provide his presentation. Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. This is my annual report to the Audit Committee on delivery of the Internal Audit Plan for the last financial year 2025-26. The report also includes my annual opinion on the Council's internal control environment based on the work we carried out last year. I can confirm that we achieved 86% completion of the 25-26 revised audit plan that was approved by the committee in November 25, and that was against a target of 90%. A total of 32 audit assignments were completed with the following assurance and opinions. 3 audits received full assurance, 15 received substantial assurance, 9 received adequate assurance, and 5 audits received limited assurance. The 5 limited assurance audit opinions were issued for the following audits: financial resilience, efficiency plan savings, capital receipts, adult social care payments, and looked after children's external placement costs. Full details of these, the high priority recommendations made against these audits is given at Appendix 2 of the report, and officers from the service areas are in attendance to take any questions from members. Given the Council's current financial position, both the governance and risk management arrangements were strengthened during 2025-26 and early in 26-27 with a new independent improvement panel and a finance improvement committee to oversee all the arrangements being made to tackle the current financial crisis. With 86% completion of the revised audit plan and 56% of the completed audit assignments receiving either full or substantial assurance, I'm able to conclude that there's still a reasonable level of internal controls, risk management and governance arrangements operating across the Council during 25-26. And I'm happy to take any questions from members.
Are there any questions on presentation? Okay. Are there any comments on this presentation? No? Yes, Councillor Baywater.
Yes, just the procurement, contract management and procurement, because that's been an issue raised many times over the last couple of years. And in the action plan, we've got sort of slippage where it's now nearly the target date is now 2 years. It's 2 years later than originally, isn't it? So I think it's this autumn, if I remember right, page 381. So how confident can we be that procurement and that contract management will be improved by that date, because it's something that's been going on a long time, the concern about it.
I think that's the agenda item.
It's the
AGS, the annual government statement. Yeah, that we picked up later, Liz.
14.
Yeah, that's on agenda item 14.
We're on questions, are we? I'm slightly lost track. Okay, so if I look at item 12, appendix 2, 283 in the pack, and 284, I mean, the question I've got is, as the recommendation and the management response say, we're going to continue to monitor this. I think the question is, will there be a point at which we conclude that the savings in the savings plan is not going to be achievable within the financial year, and therefore we need to find something else? And how will that something else have visibility? I'm just conscious that it seems to me if we do nothing more than monitoring, at the end of the day we will have an overspend this financial year in the same way as we did the last financial year. So I would be interested in answer to, in a nutshell, whether there's a plan B.
Surinder, can you answer that one?
So the efficiency audit we're doing on a continuous basis, so we've started that piece of work already. That will challenge the mitigations that are being reported to the improvement panel and the finance and improvement committee. So I can come back in September with an update on whether we feel those mitigations are robust enough to actually achieve the savings.
Yeah. Can I have Julie, please, if you can follow it?
Yeah, thank you. So the budget as a whole we look at, which includes these savings. So when we look at the budget and the outturn, the forecast outturn, then that includes the savings. So we are looking at the whole budget, and we expect that budget should come in on target. So we are putting in place mitigations where there are shortfalls, whether that be through savings or through overspends on service delivery. The Chief Executive has asked all the directors to come forward with their mitigation plans to ensure that we come in with a balanced budget, and they will be reported through the regular trends reports that go to the Executive.
So if I may follow up, so So how do we, the members, and I don't just mean the Audit Committee, I mean we the members more generally, have visibility of these mitigation actions as they come forward?
Julie?
As I said, they're reported in through the executives, through the trends report, and that trends report is also reviewed by the Budget Overview and Scrutiny Committee on a monthly basis as well.
Are there any more questions? Any comments on this presentation? Yeah, Councillor Sawyer.
Okay. Well, thank you, Julie. I hear what you say. But I think what we're getting at the moment is Surinder's working quite hard with the team, looking at the monitoring processes and the way the savings plan is being governed, and that's very useful. But we need something more, and the something more we need is to be sure that when a saving, and there are some, if we look at the dashboard which goes to Exec and Finance Improvement Committee, we see lots of red-rated efficiencies, and I accept that we're looking at the overall budget, but in terms of risks to the budget, these are certainly where some of the risks lie. We see red-rated efficiencies, and we have really no insight into what will happen if some of them are not resolved within the financial year, because some of them won't be. We saw this last year, we're going to see this year. This is just life, financial life. We can't always get what we want, as someone once said. So what I need, and what we need, and what I think Surinder should do is to not only report on the progress on the basic monitoring processes, but to make sure that there are alternative savings being identified, which themselves are capable of being obtained within the financial year. In other words, ultimately, we want as much as possible, maybe everything is too much to ask for, but as much as possible being green with the occasional amber, not ambers and the occasional red, which is what we're getting at the moment. And I think the Audit Committee needs to keep a very clear hold on this, because this is a big part of what we do. We're not responsible for this, but we're responsible for the governance of these processes, and we need to be clear publicly that we're doing our job properly. And if Surinder will do that, and I believe he's happy to go ahead with that approach, I believe we'll be better informed and better able to do our job.
Any more comments? Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. I think just building on what Councillor Sawyer said, obviously there is reporting happening in various different places, but everybody feels very strongly that this is incredibly important around the finance and the governance. But I think somehow there may be a way of just improving almost the dialogue between the different committees. We have different committees with different memberships, which means it is easy for things to get lost in the gaps. And I think perhaps it's something that we need to consider, and obviously I'm new to this committee, about how we liaise more proactively with executive, with full council, with overview, budget overview and scrutiny, just to make sure that, because these are very detailed reports, that things aren't getting missed along the way, and perhaps there's more that we can do on that going forward, because it's such an important point. Don't ask me how, though. I'll have to think about that.
Any more comments? No. The recommendation, sorry. Okay. Right. Just to let you know, is there any questions for Tom? He's here for this, especially for this item. So if you have any questions for Tom, please. No questions? Thank you very much, Tom. The Mayor, sorry.
Well, if you'll allow me, maybe a comment rather than a question. Can I just clarify, actually, before making the comment? Is the Mayor here to respond or to... There's an item called Capital Receipts Audit which concerns the Strategic Asset Group, of which I think The Mayor is Chair? No? Oh, I'm sorry, forgive me.
Here, so I might as well answer questions, whatever you ask.
I have a comment on one of the other high priority recommendations, which is the LAC funding. Can I go?
Is that a question or comment?
A comment. Do you want me to?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so the LAC is item 2 on the, it's page 291. I mean, this is an example, I suppose, of what I was trying to talk about before. I mean, it's probably the area of greatest financial difficulty for the council, and we are monitoring, the recommendation is to monitor the overspend, and the management response gives the detail of how we might do that. But, for example, if I look, and it's not part of this report, but if I was to look at the dashboard, to which I think I referred earlier, I guess the Children's Services representative, is it Ms. Field? Yeah, hi, forgive me. So if you look at your savings dashboard, the council savings dashboard, item 1 is the, actually it is looked after children, is the expected saving of £600,000 from getting the NHS to contribute to the cost of LACs where they have health issues. And this is one where, I mean, in my distant past, I was actually portfolio holder for this area, and I do remember trying to do exactly the same thing then, basically, and failing. And I don't wish to sound harsh, but the council has sought to do this, but ultimately has failed, maybe too strong a word, but has not succeeded. For probably 10, 15, maybe even more years, because the division of responsibility, I think, hasn't changed. The law is, broadly speaking, in the same place. Both authorities, both organisations have responsibility. So my concern is we can monitor this, and we can have all the meetings that I think it's suggested that we're being had, but ultimately, I would suggest to you we will not get this money, and we'll need another way of achieving this saving, otherwise we'll have an overspend. If you're able to comment on this concern, please do go ahead with Chair's permission. But that's my concern.
Are there any more comments? Yes.
Hi Tom, I'm Neil Harris. I'm the independent member of the Audit Committee. I wasn't aware of you coming for this item, so just forgive me, I've been given a little bit of thought as to a question to ask you. But given your position, what do you, and looking at the Council's current financial position and the EFS decisions that have been made by government, what do you see as the key financial risks facing the Council over the next 12 months? And how confident are you on the Council's measures to address those?
Well, what splendid questions. Before I forget, I will wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Sawyer, because I've been in this trade long enough to know that the NHS are difficult people to deal with, and I think he is pushing on an open door that we will be a very long time getting our money. And he's probably right, that we could probably have to put something in the budget. To answer your question, the key financial risk, I have to be careful here, but last year virtually everything came in on budget or not too bad, on virtually every single department, and that was really very difficult for a number of departments, except for one. And one department in particular just overspent and then went and overspent more. And when it is that department and when it is children, you can't hold back. You can't say, oh, I'll gatekeep or I'll do something different. There is absolutely nothing an elected member can do except say yes. Because the reputational damage to the council, if we have a Damalona Taylor or something else, is incredible. So you just say yes. That's the danger. We have no control over those discretionary spends of how many children come in. We know we've got problems at Yarlswood, they're affecting us. We know we have problems of people moving in, they're affecting us. We cannot know that number. We cannot predict it. It's unpredictable, it's difficult, and that is the problem. So we're dealing with situations of heart-rendingly difficult decisions for officers to make. And it doesn't matter who's in the big chair and who the executive are, they have this problem of dealing with a service that is serving the public and unable to say, whoa, stop. Because on everything else, like tarmac or roads, you can say, well, stop that. You cannot stop adult services and children's. And so we have this situation where many of them are demand-led, and we don't know where that demand's going. And I am very worried. But I am very hopeful in that we have just about every person who's got a gong or an MBE or something else for, you know, and we have a collection of people who are second to none in looking after our children and our adults. And having sat through one or two of these meetings, I'm overawed that we've got sort of nationally renowned experts on guiding us and helping us. And, you know, we've got endless committees now of people helping us and guiding us and looking at the finance of these things. And when you look at it, you think, well, what would they do? And very often they would not have done anything differently. But that is the key worry. And when you said, what is the worry? That is the worry. It keeps me awake at night because there is absolutely nothing. If there's a family come in and, you know, they come in and there's 4 or 5 children, the cheapest deal, sort of £5,000–6,000 sometimes, maybe £10,000 or £15,000 a week. We do not know. And that's the terrible thing. So you do all the budgets, you do everything, and you hope. And that is what we've got. We've got a situation. So hopefully it does answer some of your concerns. You've probably sparked off a whole load more questions.
Well, have you got a follow-on question?
That's really honest and candid, thank you very much. I just wanted to also flip it over and just say, well, obviously we're all aware of what's happening with potentially some massive opportunities in and around Bedford as well, with Universal and growth and things like that. So how do you balance the two? Because you've got major worries, whereas at the same time we've got something major that could actually, if it's done in the right way, could support the council's future financial sustainability. So what do you think about that?
There was a small time where I hoped many of them would be such that business rates would flow in like a mighty river into the council and all our finances would be solved. But the government very handily moved the goalposts. I don't think we're ever going to get that sort of cash. But what we can do is say that we're going to have a lot of growth, a lot of jobs, a lot of employment. A lot of people are going to find work here. And that is the most interesting thing, because when you're in Kempston and Kempston Hardwick, these are areas that need jobs, need employment. And I'm really pleased that we have a hand in creating that many jobs and employment. And we have a future that I think is second to none. You know, I had another hotel chain wanting and inquiring after a ground. And you're just thinking, yes, we're going to need 7,000 or 8,000 beds if one of the surveys is correct in our hotel network. So there are jobs, there's going to be employment and everything else that comes with it. So I am very excited about the future. Contrast the day-to-day work makes it even more agonising that we're having to cut our cloth. Because I have a feeling that in 3 or 4 years' time, this council will be in a very different place.
Yes, Councillor Bear, Water.
A question sort of related about children's services, but not about looked after children, but about SEND, because there is a little bit of a lifeline from this government, isn't it? It's not enough, but it's a little bit in terms of SEND funding. And given the massive pressures and the growing pressures on children's services overall, and on SEND and on schools, has the council submitted its SEND reform plan to the DFE?
I've just had this nod from Chief, yes to your answer. Yes, there is. And if you wanted the political lecture about the SEND school and our and what we are also doing this summer, I won't bore you with that tonight. But yeah, I thank you for your question, and I thank the Chief for sort of tipping me the wink and saying yes.
Any more questions? Now, I'll go back to comments again. Any more comments? No? Yes, Councillor Sawyer.
Thank you. I mean, I'm going back to the Mayor's comments on children and adults. I mean, he's absolutely right. Our safeguarding duties, and we have other statutory duties in relation to children and adults, are paramount. And I think, you know, it's been said many times. However, that does not necessarily mean that we just have to respond to demand in a financial sense. I mean, surely the example is clearly with us with Newton and the adult services. Newton have showed us, or are showing us, after considerable investment by us, admittedly, that it is possible to run the service differently in a more cost-effective way, and they're going to assist us in delivering some of these savings. Now, I can't remember whether or not we're doing something similar in terms of getting external advice on children's, but we mustn't just give up. We have to, there are better ways of doing things without abandoning our statutory responsibilities and therefore allowing harm to come to our vulnerable residents, be they children or adults. But there are things that can be done, and I'd like that to be recognised, and that we will do the best we can to manage our costs, even in these difficult situations.
Yes, so Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a quick comment about something the Mayor said during his universal response, which was that he seems to be indicating that his the business rates argument that the Council's been advancing seems to be falling on deaf ears in government, and I think that's very deeply concerning to me as both as a member of the Universal Overview and Scrutiny Committee, one of my 6 dozen committees these days, and also as just a resident of the borough, because while Universal represents such a fantastic opportunity for our borough, it does come with red on the other side of the ledger. It will come with, you know, displacement issues. It will come with issues around gentrification and communities being priced out of neighbourhoods. These are serious issues that we will need to be able to respond to as a borough, and if the government aren't willing to allow us to take the benefits of Universal, then we need to, I think, make a very strong case to the government and indeed to our members of Parliament to lobby the government to ensure that they actually do enable us to take the benefits that the Mayor seems very keen that we do bank. So while the Mayor is here, I'd like to use this as an opportunity to urge him, firstly, to write to the borough's 3 members of Parliament and let them know what's going on, and then secondly, to write to whichever minister is now in post with this department to make sure that they are aware of the situation and to try and get a favourable hearing with them.
Thank you. His comments, yeah. Councillor Baywater.
Thank you. Yes, I absolutely echo what Councillor Simmons said, because I'm positive about Universal, but the pressures in so many ways on the council and the subsequent financial pressures are potentially incredible. So we really need to make sure we have that income. Just a quick comment on a completely different point in the report, but about capacity and whether we have sufficient staff. So, for example, in the estates team, we've got still rent and lease reviews backlog. And in the finance team, do we have sufficient staff in the finance team? I know they're working incredibly hard, but that's been an ongoing issue. So is the Mayor confident that those really important teams at the key of our recovery, is he confident, are you confident that those teams are sufficiently resourced and staffed?
in the spirit of truthfulness, you always have those worries, because we do seem to rely on one or two very, very good officers. It's a luxury to have loads and loads of people to stand in, but I am very worried that the loss of one or two very key officers would put the borough in a tricky situation. So I've asked the Chief to look at this and see what we can do. Your question is very perceptive, because we do rely overly on some, I think it's a very good question.
Just to sort of follow up, thank you. Thank you for your honesty. And I just wondered if there's any specific incentives on retention, so we don't have burnt out staff and that we don't lose people to other authorities.
The Chief wants to answer that.
So I think it's Council's responsibility to make sure that I have sufficient budget as the head of paid service to deliver services. And I think one of the things that we do look at is areas where we compare what the market rates are for jobs and, if necessary, apply allowances to support that. I think we've recognised that there is a need for additional capacity in finance, and Julie and Rianne and the team have been looking at that with coming up with a robust structure, and that's really, really important. And we have also looked at key areas. So, as you know, we've put additional investment into children's services for capacity. So we have done that within the budget, and we're making sure that we're getting the right resources in the right place. Recruitment and retention for local authorities is challenging, and I think we've discussed that in other places as well. That's more challenging when there is a competitive private sector market. So that picks up on some of the points you've made around particularly estates, where there are private sector jobs. I think we have been focused on recruitment and retention, and also retaining. We've done very well on moving people who join us on an agency basis and coming and converting them to permanent staff. So there are lots of things that we're doing in those areas, but the key element I think is reflected, and I think it's reflected in the annual governance statement, is making sure that we're putting some more capacity back into finance to support the wider organisation. But as you know, we will be talking about some of those issues at the Employee Partnership Committee.
I know I'll keep going questions and then the comments. Is there any comments now? No? Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you very much for coming in. Yes, recommendation. The committee is requested to consider the report, seek any clarification and acknowledge the Head of Internal Audit's annual opinion for 2025-2026 that there has been good level of internal control operating across the council. Is that all agreed? Yeah. Thank you. Right, we go back onto the agenda item 7. Yeah. It's 7 or 6? Yeah. Agenda item 7. Right. Agenda item number 7. Terms of reference. Are there any questions on that one? No? Are there any comments on this? Yes, come.
So my only comment is a thank you to the officers for updating the terms of reference to account for a number of comments that have been made kind of offline and to reflect best practice. The only other comment I would make is just to keep the situation associated with external audit under review, bearing in mind that there's going to be a new set of arrangements when the local audit office is established later this year around appointment of external auditors and also the quality oversight of external auditors. But as drafted, it's fit for purpose as it stands now.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Any more comments? No? Right. Recommendation. The committee is invited to consider and, if satisfied, to accept the amended terms of the reference and recommended it for approval to the Constitution Review Working Group, General Purpose Committee, and then to full council to be adopted into the council's constitution. Is that agreed? Thank you. Yeah. Right, we move to agenda item 8, draft statement of the account 2025-2026. Right. Can I ask Rhian Bowen, Service Director for Finance, to provide her presentation? Rhian, please. All right, so she's coming on now.
So we're going to have a look at the statement of accounts for 25-26. So we'll look at the legislative framework, the revenue position, including the use of EFS, some of the core statements and the key messages from there, along with the collection fund and the pension fund. So in terms of the legislative framework, the accounts are prepared following the International Financial Reporting Standards and the SIPFA Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting. The draft accounts were approved by the Executive Director of Resources and the Council's Section 151 officer and published on the Council's website on the 30th of June 2026 in line with the statutory deadline. Richard Walton from KPMG will present the audit plan later in the agenda, which will include the work on building back assurance following the disclaimed opinions. It should be noticed the backstop date for the audit to complete has been brought forward to the end of January for the 25-26 audit. Apologies that is small, but I believe you have all been sent a copy of the slides, so that hopefully you can read it. So this relates to the revenue position, and it's detailed in the narrative report to the accounts and has also been reported to the Executive on the 15th of July 2026. The full details of all variances to the budget can be seen within the reports pack to the Executive. So the position shows that on the core services shown in the operational net cost, there was an overspend of 16.9 million, which was predominantly related to children's services, but also the additional demand-led areas within adult social care and the housing benefits subsidy, all of which were monitored and reported throughout the year to relevant executive and overview and scrutiny committees. The overspend is reduced slightly when taking into account the non-operational or financing costs, and that's reduced by 1.6 million. But there were also two items of exceptional spend within the year, which were in relation to the ongoing costs associated with the explosion at Cleat Hill of 1.8 million. And during the year, the Council did a full review of the costs associated with Wixham's train station following the changes to the platform and the takeover by the DFT. And that then meant that £570,000 of that spend was no longer deemed to be capital, and that's been moved into the revenue account. So the total overspend then was 17.7 million. As reported to the Executive and full Council throughout 25-26, the Council applied for exceptional financial support, and in February we were notified that the Minister was minded to approve the application. The EFS application was in two parts. There was up to 2 million to fund the ongoing Cleat Hill expenditure, which was 1.8 million as at year end, and up to 20 million for the general fund pressures, which was applied in its entirety. So it's important to note that EFS is granted by way of a capitalisation directive, meaning that the value is capitalised and therefore funded by capital receipts or borrowing. By applying the 21.8 million of EFS, the balance of 4 million was then shown on the revenue account. Following the war in the Middle East that began in March, we saw energy prices start to fluctuate. So it's been recommended to put £1 million into an energy resilience reserve and use the remainder to bring the general fund balance closer to the risk assessed minimum level, with a return to the risk assessed minimum level expected within 26-27 due to a budgeted transfer to the reserve. So some observations from the core statements and some key figures. So the gross capital expenditure of 85 million was achieved against a budget of 126 million. This has also been reported to the executive last week with explanations over the key capital projects, and the proposed slippage was also reported to the executive. The general fund increased by 4.5 million due to the budgeted contribution and the EFS allocation, leading to a balance in the general fund reserve at year end of 14.2 million. The net pension liability is the difference between the council share of the net assets and the share of the estimated liability of the fund to pay retirement benefits to its members, and this changes year on year based on the assumptions and calculations made by the actuary. Capital financing requirement tells you how much of the capital spend has not yet been financed in the current year, i.e. it's not funded by capital receipts or grants and will be financed in future years by charges to revenue as the assets are used. And this has risen by nearly 5 million during 25-26. Borrowing reduced by 27 million during the year, and this is largely due to the timing of receipts received for the capital programme. So during the early part of 25-26, we received quite a lot of funding that related to spend that took place in 24-25, and so that has done it. We've also amended the profile of borrowing, so we took out some longer term debt throughout the year, which has reduced our short term borrowing but increased our long term, and this has brought us closer to our treasury indicators, which we've made more progress with during 26-27. So the movement in reserves statement shows the movement from the start of the year to the end of the year related to the reserves held by the authority, and is categorised into usable reserves, those that can be used to fund expenditure, and unusable reserves that can't be used to fund expenditure, for example the revaluation reserve. So the annual performance in red is the deficit on provision of services in the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, and I'll go into more in that in the next slide. Statutory adjustments in green are mainly related to capital adjustments in accordance with proper accounting practices, and the total general fund balance in blue of 32 million is made up of the general fund and earmarked reserves, which does also include balances related to schools of about 2 million, and also includes the deficit of 1.7 million on the DSG reserve, which is also included. Usable reserves include both the general fund balance and the capital grants that have not yet been applied. And the EFS values also come through the statement and are shown in purple on the screen. So the comprehensive income and expenditure account shows the net cost of providing services. So within other operating expenditure, shown in red, is predominantly the loss on disposal of non-current assets. It's lower than in previous years, as there were several school transfers to academies, and the transfer of the special school took place within 24-25. So there's a change in net finance and investment income is also shown, and this is related to the value of the financial pooled funds, which increased in year by 4.3 million, compared to a rise of 890,000 in the previous year. The income and expenditure related to investment properties and increases in their fair value were 8.5 million as opposed to 6.3 million in the previous year. And this is offset by interest payable of 4.8 million, which is slightly higher than previous years, which is reflecting the increase in interest rates over the year. Taxation and non-specific grant income shows an overall increase, which is made up of an increase in local taxation, as in council tax and NNDR business rates. Non-ring-fenced government grants remain broadly in line with the previous year, and a decrease in capital grants and contributions recognised due to the fact that they were particularly high the year before. It also shows the impact of the revaluations of assets and the measurements of the net defined benefit pension fund. So the expenditure and funding analysis shows how the annual expenditure funded from taxation is used by the authority in comparison with those resources consumed by the authority. So it shows how the spend is allocated for decision-making purposes. It draws together figures from the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, and the right-hand column includes movements and necessary statutory adjustments, including the EFS shown in the movement in reserve statement. To show the movement in the general fund and earmarked reserves of 4 million, and the balance of the reserves at the bottom of 32 million, which is an increase of 4 million from 28 million shown in 24-25. The balance sheet sets out the assets and liabilities of the council, along with the usable and unusable reserves as at the year end. We don't always expect it to be consistent year on year, as it is a snapshot at a point in time. The notes to the financial statement give more detail on each item, but looking at some of the larger values and movements, property, plant and equipment is mainly made up of operational land and buildings, which accounts for 439 million, and infrastructure assets of 219 million. The value of this moves year on year based on additions, disposals, depreciation and revaluations, and properties are revalued on a rolling basis in accordance with the accounting policies. Short-term borrowing, as I've just mentioned, has reduced due to the payment of grants from central government in year and the reprofiling of debt from short to long term. The movement in the pension liabilities and other long-term liabilities is due almost in its entirety to the movement in the local government pension scheme and is consistent with the actuarial report received. And finally, the usable reserves and unusable reserve figures are seen as in the movement in the reserves statement earlier. In addition to the core statements, there are also a number of notes to the accounts. So just picking up on a couple of key notes. So the first note is the accounting policies, and this details how the council interprets the code and how we've interpreted the local authority code of practice, and provides clarity as to how the calculations have been made. It also contains the council's assessment of its going concern status. Another key note is the reserves note, which details the reserves held by the council, and it shows that this has increased by 4 million. This is mainly due to the EFS and how we have allocated that. Earmarked reserves reduced by 1.8 million and is made up of planned increases and decreases throughout the year. A breakdown of reserve by directorate is seen within the statement of accounts, but a full list of reserves was presented to the executive as part of the outturn report and can be seen in the papers for that committee. The dedicated schools grant reserve has reduced by 1.3 million and has increased the DSG deficit to 1.7 million. This is a national issue, with most education authorities now in a deficit on their DSG reserves. The DfE have announced the intention to fund 90% of the deficit as at the 31st of March 2026 by way of a grant that's due to be distributed to councils this autumn. A statutory override is also in place, which allows councils to carry a deficit on the DSG that is not charged to the general fund, and that's in place until March 2028. It should be noticed that while the DSG deficit is 1.7 million, that is made up of the high needs deficit of 3.7 million, along with some surpluses in some of the other parts of the DSG. The collection fund also forms part of the statement and shows the income received from local taxation, so from council tax and business rates, and includes the surplus and deficit in year and carried forward. Although a combined deficit in year, overall the collection fund remains in surplus as at the end of the year. I'll hand over to Mike now to talk about the pension fund accounts. Yeah, it is.
Thanks, Rhiannon. So I've got a couple of slides on the pension fund accounts. As you'll know, Bedford Borough Council is the administering authority for the Bedfordshire Pension Fund. So the pension fund accounts therefore form part of the council's overall statement of accounts. However, they are separately, independently audited by KPMG. So the accounts were completed and approved on the 29th of May, so ahead of the statutory deadline, and they're prepared in line with the LGPS regulations and the CIPFA Code of Practice. An important development for members to note is the planned move to standalone pension fund accounts, designed to provide greater visibility and transparency for stakeholders. Though I think I believe we're not. The regulations haven't yet been laid, and it's still unclear in terms of the timing of that. If we move to the second slide, this slide summarises the fund income, expenditure, investment performance during 2025-26. So starting with member-related activity. Contributions and transfers into the fund total 193.6 million, and that's an increase from the 177.7 million in the previous year, and that reflects the continued growth in contribution income and higher transfer in activity. Against this, the fund paid benefits and transfers out totaling 175.1 million. So taken together, this results in net additional dealings from members 18.6 million. So the fund remained cash flow positive during 2025-26, meaning that there's no need to draw income or redeem investments to pay pension benefits. Management expenses of 28.8 million were slightly higher than in 2024, but broadly in line. The bottom half of the fund account focuses on investments, so the fund's investment income was broadly similar to last year. However, the fund's profit or loss on disposal and changes in market value totaled 355.6 million, and that reflects a particularly strong year of growth and reflects market performance across the fund's investment portfolio. So all that results in the fund's net assets of just over 4 billion as at the 31st of March 2026. On the final slide, so this slide presents the fund's balance sheet position at year end and explains how the assets reconcile back to the closing net asset value shown on the fund account. The fund's investment assets, as I said, have grown significantly, as I highlighted previously. In terms of other highlights on this slide, investment liabilities reduced from 16.4 million to 2.2 million during the year, and that mainly reflects the outstanding capital drawdowns requests from investment managers as at the 31st of March 2026, and the fact that they were lower this year compared to the previous year. Current assets have also reduced significantly from 108.5 million to 42.3 million, and that reflects the lower cash balances held at the year end. That was all I was going to say on the pension fund accounts, but I'm happy to take any questions on them.
Any questions on this presentation? Yes, Mr. Harris.
Thank you both for your comprehensive presentation. I think as an observation, it's great to see this because, frankly, we all know that financial statements in local government are highly complicated, and so having an ability to set out the high-level messages and understand the connections between the statements, I'm sure, has been helpful to everybody as the system itself looks to make things a bit simpler in the future. So thank you very much for that. And can I also thank everybody in the finance team for producing the statement of accounts in the form it is in at this stage, because I think a lot of work has gone into producing those statements, given the backdrop of the council's financial position and current uncertainty. Those accounts, from my perspective, are a comprehensive first draft for audit, and as a result, I've had some questions with the officers offline, most of which have been addressed. I think the only observation I'll make, and it's partly a question, Chair, as well in this forum, is about Wixom's, only on the grounds that I agree with the way KPMG have presented that risk in their audit plan, and it's been helpful to get the officers' comments on how that's currently been accounted for in the financial statements. I just want to get a sense of, we're all aware that there's been a derecognition of that asset and why, but I think it's more of a question for me about what other tests are going to be made around the whole spend that's been incurred and any other impairment that's may be likely on that front within the financial statements, and how you'll seek to resolve that with the auditors before the audit is concluded.
You can answer that, Rhian.
Thank you. So we have had extensive external advice related to the project at Wixom's and the accounting treatment of it. We have shared that along with our interpretation of it with KPMG, and we will work with KPMG throughout the audit to ensure that it is properly recognised now and in the future.
Are you satisfied with currently how that's presented in the accounts? So in terms of how you've written down the costs that are not eligible as capital, but you've taken advice on how to deal with the derecognition. So I'm just trying to get a sense of how it's currently presented within the accounts. You're comfortable reflects the advice that you've had, and then therefore it's subject matter for audit.
Yes, we have recognised in the accounts how we believe it should be. As I say, we've shared all our assumptions and the external advice we've received with KPMG, and we will work with them.
Sorry, Craig.
Thank you. I just think it helpful to contribute now, because I was going to come on to it when I presented my paper, but I think that it is an item to comment on. So within our plan, you'll see that I've pulled it out as a separate elevated audit risk. So I'm not saying it's a significant audit risk just because of the size of it compared to other elements of your assets. I don't think it reaches that point, but it is an area where there's going to be quite a lot of audit judgments. I've been through the proposed accounting policy as it is, so as it's currently stated. I've seen the advice from the external third party. I've sent back a series of questions and comments on that accounting, and there's a couple of initial audit tests that I've kind of put forward as well. I note that the review included moving some bits of expenditure that were capitalised into revenue costs, so that was just pulled out in the presentation. That's one initial risk, I think, that's been mitigated to do that. But I do have my main kind of concern. I'm not saying this is something I know is wrong, but it's an area that I really want to get clear on. Is it's clear that the asset is moved out of the council's books, and that makes sense. But the timing of any impairment and the accounting of that impairment are two things that it's so unusual that I don't know off the top of my head what the accounts treatment is, and so therefore we'll work through what the third party has said. I will consult internally within KPMG for our real experts about this. I found someone who can value a train station, for example, so I've already got the right people lined up to help me with it. But it is an area that will take us probably months to work through, because of the nature of the specialised advice I need. And I'll give an update to the next committee, but it's an area that we'll work through.
Any more questions? Yes, Mr. Dr. Councillor Sawyer.
Yeah, a couple which hopefully might be quick ones. So I recollect that there's a SIPFA recommendation in terms of the proportion of reserves, I think, to our income or budget. Can one of you comment on what the percentage is shown by these accounts?
Yes, go ahead, Julie.
So there's not a specific percentage that the council has to hold. At one point in time, many years ago, that there was a recommendation. I'm trying to think who it was. The Audit Commission, I think, at one point made a recommendation. So it's for each authority to determine the appropriate level of reserves that the council should hold, and we do that by looking at the risk and probabilities of financial pressures across each service area to come up with a range, a minimum and maximum, because I don't think it's as clear cut as it's X. I think having a range. So we manage with the range. So this is heading towards, I think it's very slightly underneath the risk assessed range. And that's because we've reviewed the risk assessed range as part of this process. So we've slightly increased the range. So if we were in the same range as we had started at the beginning of the year, we would be within range. We're slightly under, and as Rhiannon has said, we expect within the current financial year to be within the range that we recommend.
Go ahead, Councillor.
One more. This is probably for you, Rhiannon. Thanks for the presentation. Notice there's quite a big, I haven't got the actual page in front of me, deficit on the collection fund during the year. And I guess that's because largely you had to write off a number of council tax debts. I mean, from your side, what's your take on why it's so much bigger this year than last year? And when I say this year, I mean 25-26 compared with 24-25.
Yes, Rhiannon.
Yeah, we can get you a full written answer on that. We have had some issues around some revaluations within the business rates sector within 25-26, which are unwinding, particularly around renewables. But we are, in terms of our collection rates, we are within the standard across the benchmarking for the authorities, and we are exceeding some authorities' collection rates.
But the deficit's gone up substantially, hasn't it? I mean, I think it's page 116 in the accounts. I don't want to dwell on the numbers, but it looks like it's gone up quite a lot for this council. So are you saying that the range has reduced, I guess, in terms of the collection percentage across local authorities? Difference. It's 116 of the statement, page 120 in the pack.
I think it would be better if we gave you a written answer. It isn't down to, I can assure you, it isn't down to collection rates. Our collection rates, we just had the stats through, and we are higher than the England and the unitary average. But I think it's about the appeals on renewables, but I need to come back and give you a written answer, David.
Right. Any more questions? Is there any comments on this report? Okay, recommendation. The committee is invited to consider, and if satisfied to the notes of presentation, is this agreed? Thank you. Right. We move to agenda item 9, external audit of the Statement of Accounts 2024-2025, Bedford Borough Council. Please could I ask Richard Bolton from the KPMG to provide his presentation. So Richard.
Thank you. So I've got a series of papers this evening. I'll take you through them now. The first one is a annual auditor's report. It's a bit odd, and it's the second one I've reported during the year, so that's not annual. But it is an update to the version that I reported in November 25. What the legislation requires is that I report on an annual basis the findings of my audit for that period. If you think back to November, my audit was very much still ongoing at that stage, and so the annual auditor's report was quite short. It just stated that the audit was ongoing. It included some commentary about value for money risks at that stage, but it didn't include a lot of detail about the nature of the findings for that period. So I'm not required to update that, but we at KPMG think that it's best practice and useful to the members of the committee and indeed the members of the public, because this report is a public document. So this paper is an updated version of our annual auditor's report that we did issue back in November. So it does the same things. It's a public-facing summarised version of our reporting for the period. So it reports the headline messages from the papers that you've already had through the committee during the period. Most of the content of this you will have seen before at previous meetings. Page 4 of our report, page 180, is the kind of headline messages, which is that we issued a disclaimer audit in regards to the accounts for 24-25. We did that before the backstop at the end of February, and the detail within this paper sets out the reasons for that. Indeed, on page 12 of the paper we set out, as I took you through to the last committee, the key drivers of the disclaimer and the proposed way forward, so that the steps that we're going to take working with management to resolve those matters and move away from a disclaimer in future periods. We also reported at the last committee that I was going to mention 2 significant weaknesses in regards to value for money, that is in regards to the budgetary process and the capacity of the finance team. They are not new issues, this is just reporting the issues that we said before. Given the nature of that report, repeats things already, I'm happy to take any questions on that, but happy to move on to the next paper as well. So.
Any questions on this work? No? Okay. Any comments on this vote? No? Yes, Councillor Sawyer.
So the latest audit, Richard, thank you for the report. So it's 25-26. Is that going to be a full scope audit?
Yes, so the scope of our audit is full. The aim of our work is to undertake a full audit, and that is indeed what we did for 24-25. The backstop requires us to stop when we get to that point. So without the backstop, we would have just kept going until we reached a point of issuing either a qualified or a non-qualified opinion. I don't think the nature of the council in and of itself means that there should be a disclaimer, but the existence of the backstop, the driver from the government to get assurance reporting back on a timely basis and move through gaining some assurance, means that we had to issue a disclaimer because we basically ran out of time, for want of a better term, to complete the matters that we highlighted before. As I stand here today, I fully anticipate to make further steps forward, which is what the plan takes you through. I'll come on to in a second about the build back assurance process, because there's some commentary on that within my 25-26 plan. I think when I get to that bit, I may give you a bit more detail, if that makes sense. It makes more sense if I get to it then. Yes, the intention is to do a full audit and report more assurance as we can get to it before the next backstop.
Any comments? No? Right. The recommendation, the committee is invited to consider and, if satisfied, to note KPMG Auditor's Annual Report for 2024-2025 financial statement of the councils, including their VFM assessment. Is this agreed? Yeah, thank you. Agenda item 10, external audit of the Statement of the Accounts 2025-2026 Bedford Borough Council. Please could I ask Richard Walton from KPMG to provide his presentation.
Thank you. So this deals with 25-26, and this is our plan for the audit for the year ending March 26. The content of this is very similar to that in previous periods, but I'll take you through some of the key areas that are different and some of the areas of interest to yourselves. First thing I'll point on is indeed the matter just referred to in terms of building back assurance. Our work is that the first detailed piece of work that we've been doing over the last few weeks, and indeed we're very much in the middle of finalising this piece of work now, is that work in regards to rebuilding assurance. The risk assessment process that we've been following, we've looked back at the period that wasn't subject to audit. We've done some analysis of the way in which the balances within the accounts have flowed from that period. We go back to the last audit opinion before we were around, and then work the way through. So you've got 1 year before we were re-auditors plus the 2 years that I've disclaimed myself. That will help us understand the movements of the balances within the accounts to see if there's any things that look unusual, any areas that would have lead us to do specific testing. What we're looking for there is a risk and material misstatement that would impact in the current year's accounts that we're auditing. So things like the valuation of assets, that's not necessarily something that would impact your accounts now, because the valuation of something 3 years ago isn't really that relevant because we're auditing the valuation as at this year. So we can kind of discount that. But further to that, there are specific areas that we look at, the treatment of capital receipts, the treatment of government grants, things like that. So that work is ongoing. I had an email today whilst I was out and about that my team have finalised that and it's with me to review, so I'm going to be looking at that in the coming days. There's a few areas of questions that we've raised to the finance team, and we're waiting our response to those. But once we get those through, we should be able to send our draft reporting through to Julie next week to allow me to report to MHCLG in the same timeline as all the other audits that are subject to disclaimer, which is by the end of July. We appreciate that is coming relatively soon, but the nature of the work we've got and the fact that you only have 1 year of disclaimer before we've been auditing, and my knowledge of the council of the last couple of years means that I'm pretty clear on my view, and that I think rebuilding assurance is possible for yourselves. It's just a question of the timing of it, and linking into the ongoing matters that I've reported to you already about the capacity of the finance team. So that is going to be the broad summary of what I report in a few weeks' time, but that is very much being finalised. So that's the first thing I wanted to pull out. The next thing is over the page, in terms of materiality. I think it's important to note that your level of materiality, I've kept it lower than average, so I'm keeping it at 1% of total spend. The kind of quote-unquote normal level is double that, at 2% of total spend, and the reason I've kept it at 1 is because of the general interest from either the public or central government or the various kind of stakeholders of the council. Lots of people are interested in your financial position, and so my audit is therefore, people are slightly more bothered about it, so I react to that by lowering my materiality level with a view to finding more errors. Also, the way in which I discount materiality, we use a percentage of materiality to try and uncover the risk of errors being kind of collated together in the way in which things are, when the accounts are pulled together. It's normal to discount that, but the standard approach is to discount it to 75% of materiality. For yourselves, I've set it at 65%. Again, that is the same as the prior period. That's linked to the changes you've had in your finance team, and some of the issues that we've had coming out of the audit, and the fact that we're still not yet back at a kind of normal standard audit. We're still responding to a disclaimer. So there are two things that drive an increased level of testing. It drives, I'll be reporting more issues to you if I find them. Once we get back to a normal unqualified opinion, when we ever get back to that point, these numbers will get higher, so the tolerances within my audit will get back to the normal level. But I just wanted to point that out because that is different for a normal audit. Page 7 highlights the key risks in regards to The audit, these are standard really for a local authority audit. The key areas of risk for the accounts is the valuation of property, plant and equipment, and the estimation of the pensions liability. They are standard risks that we have at every local authority, and they're still relevant for yourselves. I also have the two areas of potential fraud risk, which is that due to the financial pressures the council is under, there's a potential that expenditure is treated as capital rather than revenue in nature, so therefore make it avoid the general fund. That is a common risk within local authorities, and so I have that for yourselves, and our standard approach applies. We've already had a conversation about Wixom, so I will skip past that, but the slide there highlights the nature of the work that we are going to do in regards to that. Page 218 of the pack highlights that I've rebutted the expected fraud risk over income recognition. That's a standard risk under the auditing standards, but for yourselves, the nature of your income, common with other local authorities, it'll be quite hard to manipulate that due to the standard ways in which tax is collected and the way that we can audit grants relatively straightforwardly. I've got a note within that page that's quite hidden in the text, but I'm wishing to... We also need to think about whether we rebut a fraud risk in regards to expenditure recognition under the guidance that I have as an auditor, Practice Note 10. It asks me to, as well as the standard risk over income, because in the public sector it's more common for people to hide expenditure or to manipulate the way in which expenditure is presented, I'm required to consider that from a fraud angle. That work's ongoing. In particular, and it's been picked up already in the presentation, the government announced before the year end that they were going to pay as a grant 90% of your SEND deficit. That then increases the risk that if you want to get more money out of the government, you make your SEND deficit bigger. So there's a general risk within local authority audit this year that we're just looking at the accounting entries that go towards SEND cost just to see if there's any evidence of a change in approach that would then lead to more grant coming out of to a particular local authority. The size of your deficit and therefore the size of your grant, I don't expect that to be a risk for yourselves, because compared to some other councils where the deficit is in tens of millions of pounds and the grant is very, very large, that is a much higher risk of manipulation, whereas for yourselves it's a smaller, lower number, so I don't expect that. But I just wanted to point out that that work is, I haven't yet concluded that finally. Movement of value for money. It's conspicuous by its absence in here that I haven't got the value for money risk assessment work. That is something that I would normally bring as part of my audit plan. I haven't, as I've been prioritising the Build Back Assurance work, given I need to report that in July. I will bring that to the next committee in terms of my outcome of my value for money work, the risk assessment of the areas that I wish to follow up. A number of the issues have already been commented on within this committee, so things like the way in which the cost savings are monitored, the oversight and governance changes that are in place due to in response to the SIPFA review, and the follow-up of the matters that I already reported to you as weaknesses last year. They're the kind of areas that I'll be looking at as potential risks for next year, but I'll bring a more detailed report to the next committee as I want to make sure that's complete before I do that. Happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions on this presentation? Yes, Mr. Harris.
Richard, thank you very much for the comprehensive intro to the report, because I had a couple of questions I was going to ask you, and you've answered those, particularly on the value for money risk assessment. So I would obviously welcome seeing that at the next meeting, given everything that's been discussed earlier on, but I kind of understand where you are and what steps you're putting in place to get that ready for the next meeting. I have one question and one sort of thought process for the Audit Committee, if I may. The question I have, Richard, and it's part of Build Back, but if I recall rightly, one of the things you didn't get to was the valuation of investment properties. So obviously I appreciate the point more broadly on assets and property, plant and equipment, but what's more sensitive is the valuation of investment properties. So I'm just interested to know how, where you are in your thoughts around the ability to undertake the audit of those valuations and have an audit findings on those before the backstop. I'd be interested in that. And my point more generally for the Audit Committee is it's good to know how you're working with the officers over the next week around the risk assessment and then how that's reported to MHCLG, and it's been really you've been candid about where you're likely to end up, and actually it's good to know that you think there's every chance, subject to the points that you've been making, of getting to a point of moving away from a disclaimer. My recommendation for this committee is I think it would actually be helpful for the committee to see that return when it goes in, because that return doesn't just reflect your comments, it will reflect the comments from management as well, and I think the Audit Committee should see that and not necessarily wait for the next meeting to get any update.
So I'll answer those backwards. In terms of the build back assurance, I should have said I will bring a report on that to the next meeting. So within that, that will include an update of the findings of our risk assessment, so the areas of risks of material misstatement, which is the audit language that we'd use, that I require to do further work on. Most places have found between 1 and 5, so I expect it to be in that range. It's not unusual, it's the fact that an audit wasn't done, and therefore I need to undertake procedures on anything that's in that period, or indeed things that I didn't do in a year where I disclaimed that could impact your closing position for this year. The main way that would happen is something that is inappropriately in capital that should have been in revenue, that therefore would lead to a different general fund opening number in your accounts. That's the main thing I'm looking for, but it's also the way in which grants have been done, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's something I'll bring to that meeting as a report, and it will also really clearly say which of the 4 areas I've allocated you. So do I think that it'll be easy to build back assurance? Do I think that we can do it by the deadline that's been set? Do I think it's possible, but I'm not sure I'll do it by the deadline? Or do I think it's impossible? And so I will be very clear about the end point of that. My initial steer is that I think it is possible, but as I say, because of the ongoing process of the audit, I just want to be clear about that before I finalise it. The other thing we have in there is my expectation of timeline for particular balances within the accounts. So picking up valuations when I think I'll be happy with valuation, when I expect to be from a qualification point of view, but also from a clean opinion point of view. So it sets it out really clearly, our expectation of a timeline, so that will all come to the next meeting, and clearly Julie will have sight of that in the next week or so, subject to getting the responses from management on a few matters. So that's the build back assurance point. In terms of asset valuations, so what we've done this year, which is a similar point to where I was at this time last year, but this is where I am at the moment, is that I have lined up the KPMG valuer to come and look at the valuation approach, so I get an expert from my side to attend meetings with the expert from the council side to sense check the approaches that have been followed, to then allow us to undertake sample testing, and then my expert will look at the actual valuations of it. So we will pick a sample of investment properties that the council have valued at a certain amount, and my valuer will then also do a valuation and a more sense check if there's any differences. That's the approach that we plan to do. Last year we struggled to get through to the point of doing the sample testing, so the thing we're doing different this year is that we were very clear last year it was a key issue. So I know that from management side that the pushing to get the valuation information earlier in the process has been happening, and we're wanting to get to that as soon as we are able to. And so my finance team, my audit team are prioritising getting those conversations in short order so that we can then move to the sample testing phase of it. So we're trying to do it earlier. Do I think I'll be able to do it? I can't comment on that really at the moment, because I thought last year I would be able to as well. So, but we're very clear that that is something that we want to do, and I think that with the timeline of the disclaimer getting sooner, I want to crack it this year to then allow me next year to work on the timeliness point. So that's the key driver really of the audit. But and I should have said at the start that the fact that the accounts are published on time is a real positive step, because last year they were slightly late, and I've not done a full review of it yet, but the initial set is in a decent starting point. So they're both really positive indicators, and I know that the team are working with my audit team at the moment to respond to queries from the planning phase. So we're on to a good start, but it's a long way to go.
Go ahead, Mr. Harris.
So just thank you for that. It isn't a follow-up to your point, but just while I think about it, when I read your report, I noted at the back about planned fees. And obviously this is a very sensitive subject, as from my own experience of going around audit committees, and there's a lot of variability around where that fee is, but I think it's important for this committee to be aware that there will be consultation and information from public sector audit appointments on some of the backdrop to the fees that firms are charging associating with build back. I mean, some of it will be specific to the council and the risks that you set out, Richard, but I think some of it would also be an agreement, I think that's been reached centrally, that the costs that are incurred by each firm centrally to develop their methodology for build back are something that actually is eligible to be paid back to the firms. So I think it's just to expect to see some uplift in fee coming back, and for that not to be a surprise, the nature of it, I think it'd be good to work through so it doesn't come as a surprise to this committee at the point at which the opinion's given.
Yes, so just on the fees point, so within the 25-26 plan, I've got the full detail of the numbers that we've finalised for 24-25, which is an odd way around of doing it, but when we last reported about 24-25, some of those were to be confirmed, but you'll see that they are confirmed within there. And they have just been, actually they're going to be submitted next Monday to PSA for final approval and review. So they go through, they've got a big database of how many hours things have costed across different auditors, so they sense check that I'm not overcharging for a certain matter. In terms of the build back work, that is a separate piece of work. We have had a few approved, so some of the ones that we built back last year, those fees have been approved, and it is different entity by entity. I think the ones that have been approved so far, the level of fee has been broadly similar to the amount of grant that was received. I can't say that's definite, but that's just a steer. And so that's something that we'll finalise, but we will also bring that to the next committee as well. There'll be an estimate in terms of the substantive testing element of it, but that's a much smaller fee compared to the assurance for the build back process. So, but both of those we'll talk to Julie and Rhiannon before we come to the committee with it.
Any more questions? Any comments? No? Okay. The recommendations, the committee is invited to consider and, if satisfied, to note KPMG's presentation of the audit plan for the external audit of the statement of account 2025-2026 for Bedford Borough Council. Is this agreed? Yeah. Thank you. Right, we move to the agenda item 11. Agenda item 11, external audit of the statement of the accounts 2025-2026 Bedfordshire Pension Fund. Please could I ask Richard Walton from KPMG to provide his presentation. Richard, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a bit more straightforward in that the audit of the pension fund is not something that's been subject to disclaimer in the past, so our approach and things like levels of materiality and the risks, you're much more in the pack, and it's kind of a normal audit, and this is the same as in the previous period. So I'll just touch on a couple of things, but the overall thing I wanted to get to is that this audit is very similar to all the other pension fund audits that we have. I don't have any other specific concerns to raise. On page 239 of the pack, page 3 of our paper, materiality is set at £40 million for the period. That's calculated as 1% of the assets as at the end of December 25. 1% is actually normal in that when you look at assets, you use 1% of an asset measure and 2% of expenditure. So that is a standard approach, and as I mentioned, 75% as the discount down to our performance materiality. That is where we've landed on that. So those two are standard. Page 241, page 5 of the report summarises the risks. These are very similar to other pension fund audits. The only significant risk that we're flagging is the management override of controls risk, the standard one. We have some other risks listed within there, but they are not significant risks under the standard. They are just areas that we think is helpful to report to you. The overall expectation is that our audit is progressing well. The planning's all been completed, and we are starting our audit work over the coming months. I expect to report the summary findings of the audit to the next committee, I think it is. That's what we did last year, so we're expecting to kind of still maintain our positive momentum in terms of that. As mentioned before by Mike, we can't actually issue our opinion in regards to the pension fund until we've finished on the council, so we've got to wait. There is legislation in the pipeline. When it will get enacted, I don't know, but the expectation is that will split, and that the pension fund will move to a specialist pension team to complete. But at the moment, it's part of the audit I do for the council. That isn't going to change this year. It's not going to change next year, I don't think either. So that is where we are. But the risk of the pension fund audit are pretty settled now. The one thing I wanted to flag to you this year is different. Is on page 10 of our paper, page 246. This is to reflect the fact that the actuarial valuation of the pension fund has been updated during the period. That's an operational matter, for want of a better term. It's a very important one, though, because it drives the actual contributions that the councils and all the member entities of the pension fund actually pay. What percentage of salary is collected as employers' contribution to help pay towards the pension. That is what's set by this process. So it's a really important calculation, and it's disclosed within the accounts for the year afterwards. So that disclosure is going to be in the accounts this year. We've got a set of audit procedures that we look at to check that that's fairly presented, and it's a really important disclosure because it drives a real key budget item for the council for the next few years. So that piece of work is ongoing, and we'll report to you at the same time as the other matters. It's not a significant risk because it's different to what the actual accounts say, which is a bit of an odd concept, but it's a different matter. The accounts are prepared under the accounting standards. The actual aerial valuation is about how much it will actually cost the councils. So we will look at that and report to you at the next committee. Happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions on this presentation? No? Okay. Are there any comments on this presentation? No? Okay. Recommendation. The committee is invited to consider and, if satisfied, to note KPMG's presentation of the audit plan for the external audit of the statement of accounts 2025-2026 for the Bedfordshire Pension Fund. Is this agreed? Yeah, agreed. Thank you. So we've done the agenda 12. We move to agenda 13. Agenda item 13, Global Internal Audit Standards in the UK, Public Sector, External Quality Assessment 2025-2026. Please could I ask Surinder Momi, Head of the Audit, to provide his presentation. Surinder, please.
Sorry, this has been taken by Kay, the Audit Manager. Item.
Thank you. So The year 25-26 is the first year that the new global internal audit standards applied to UK public sector. We have to have an external quality review every 5 years. In the intervening years, we do an internal self-assessment. It just so happened that this year, the first year of the GIAS coming into effect, was also the year we were due our external quality assessment. The assessor completed her assessment in June, and the results have been summarised at Appendix A, where you will see that there was near enough compliance on every area except 3 areas of partial compliance, and there was no areas of non-compliance, which is really good news for the team, with it being the first year of the new standards. And then in Appendix B, we've set out the management action plan. Now that comprises of 4 recommendations made by the external assessor and 3 improvement areas, improvement suggestions. It also includes some areas that we identified from our own self-assessment as improvement areas as well, and you'll see that some of those have already been implemented in various reports to this committee already, and the rest will be implemented over the course of the next year. And then Appendix C is the full report of the assessor, the external assessor, and Appendix D is our own quality assurance and improvement plan, which had some minor changes compared to last year. So happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions on the report? Are there any comments on the report? Yes, Councillor Sawyer.
Thanks. Thanks, Kay, for the report. I think one of the most interesting recommendations is for us to meet privately with the auditors, which we're doing at this meeting for the first time. And I think that should hopefully improve the quality of the work and the process of the Audit Committee.
Yes, Mr. Harris.
I just want to echo that point from Councillor Sawyer, but generally to say this is a really good report, and congratulations to the internal audit team, I think, for the outcome.
On this report? No? Okay. Recommendation. The committee is requested to consider the report, seek clarification, and if satisfied, to acknowledge the result of the 2025 EQA of the Council's Internal Audit Service conformance with the GIS UKPS at the Appendix A. Agreed. Thank you. Approve the management action plan at the Appendix B. Yeah, all agreed. Acknowledge the external quality assessor's full report at the Appendix C. Yeah, okay. And acknowledge of the quality assurance and improvement plan QAIP at the Appendix D. All agreed? Thank you. Right, thank you. We'll move to the agenda item 14. Agenda item 14, draft annual governance statement 2025-2026. Please could I ask Laura Church, Chief Executive, to provide her presentation. Laura, please.
Thank you, Chair. This paper, I think as the Audit Committee is aware, I agreed that I would attend Audit Committee when the annual governance statement is considered, and it's considered a number of times through the year. So this report sets out the key areas around governance. you've had an opportunity to review it, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions on the report? Yes, Councillor Barewater.
Thank you. Yes, it's really thorough and actually makes really interesting reading. Well, one small point I had, one small question was about complaints. So 83.5% of complaints responded to within the required timeline. I just wondered, I mean, that sounds quite good, but I just wondered how that compares to other authorities.
I'd have to get you a written response on that, Councillor Bywater, because I would need the performance team to have a look at that, if that's all right. Thank you.
Any more questions? Yes, Mr. Harris.
Well, can I start by echoing Councillor Bywater's comments about just how comprehensive this governance statement is, because it's very self-reflective and open and transparent, and reflects certainly my understanding of the council since I've been here. And I think it's a very thorough report, and one I think I'd encourage not just everyone here but beyond to have a good read, because I think it does set out very well about how the council is run and where its improvement areas are. So thank you for the depth that that's gone into. I think Councillor Bywater, you did have a question earlier, and I was just going to ask the same question about contract management, which is just clearly this is a big area for the council. I'm keen to understand any exposure to the council in terms of financial risk from its existing contracts and what it's doing about future contracts. And so I'm just keen to understand, given the disclosures about the weaknesses in central procurement and contract management arrangements, what's been done to address that itself, irrespective of where internal audit might be in their programme. I don't know whether that's what you were asking as well, Councillor Bywater, but that's certainly a question I had.
So I'm going to ask Julie to answer that in a bit more detail, but could I thank you for the positive comments about the report, and actually I think should give credit to Kay and Kay in particular, and Surinder, for the amount of work that has gone into this. And I know we have tried to present it in a different way, I think probably the discussion, Kay, was to make sure that it was readable and it flows. So I think it's really positive about those comments, but I'll ask Julie to comment on the contracts piece.
Thanks, and yeah, I would just like to say my thanks to Kay, because I know she puts into an enormous amount of work into this, and the previous report, which she's very succinctly introduced, but was an enormous amount of work on that global international standards. Going back to the point about procurement, so yes, it has been an issue has been raised as an issue on a number of AGS statements, and that's not to say that work hasn't been done, but and improvements are being made, but it is still a significant issue for the council. So you will be aware, and it's been discussed earlier, that we have had Newton reviewing a number of service areas, and procurement was one of those areas that we have looked at. And as a result of that, we are putting together our own procurement transformation team that we are currently recruiting to, which is going to carry out the work that Newton have recommended, which we think will be better value for money and have good outcomes. So we have that piece of work ongoing, and that's looking at a number of things of the way that we purchase goods and services, as well as the contract management piece, and I think there's 4 or 5 work streams. We also have introduced a new procurement board that has oversight over the procurement and tendering process, and assesses that through a gateway process of going out to of putting forward a proposal to go to market, gateway for the process, and then the award. And we've also reviewed, in the process of reviewing the contract procedure rules, which now form part of the Constitution, which will go to full council in due course. So we are providing more support into directorates who have the main responsibility for managing contracts. and we will be reviewing that about whether that's the correct arrangement for contract management, whether the skills are right. So training is going to be a key part of that, and oversight will be a key part of the changes that we are making. We've also done our own self-assessment of procurement, so there is a continuous assessment. It's called a CCIF, which we have mentioned in various places through the improvement plan, which is a self-assessment of where we stand against other authorities and other public sector bodies in terms of procurement. That has demonstrated that we have got work to do, and we are working through an action plan following that. It's been assessed by the Home Office, Cabinet Office. I get it wrong every time. The Cabinet Office have given an assessment. We are working through that to become good in each of the 8 categories, and we are pulling together our reassessment for November that will then go back to the Cabinet Office, and we'll get some feedback in January. And we've committed to report back to budget overview and scrutiny after once we've had that reassessment. So I can assure you there's lots going on in procurement. I know it looks like it has stood still, but I can assure you that's not the case, and lots of work is being done.
Any more questions? Yes, Mr. Harris.
Yeah, Jude, that's a really comprehensive answer, thank you, and a lot going on, as you say. There's just a couple of thoughts I have. One is, are you just taking a sense check on current material contracts? If you're looking at your contracts register and how current contracts are being managed, and whether or not there is any risk exposure to the council that you need to take it. So it'd be useful just to answer that if you could. And I do wonder at some point whether it's internal or external audit or a combination of the two. I think it'd be helpful to have the effectiveness of those arrangements reviewed when the right time is, because clearly a lot of work's going on, but you know, now that it's been identified as a significant area of improvement and a lot's going on, I think at some point some internal or external audit review the effectiveness of those arrangements you're putting in place to improve matters, I think would be welcome assurance for the Audit Committee.
Yeah, happy for internal audit to look over it once at the right time when we have some revised arrangements in place. We have been doing lots of work on our contracts register. So we, as part of the new regulations that have been brought in around publishing our public sector procurement, we're looking at the whole pipeline. So it isn't just the current position. We are looking at what's coming up in the future, and we are assessing what procurements that the specialist team need to get involved in, as well as what is managed locally within service directorates. And we also have a partner that supports the smaller audits that perhaps our corporate team don't have the capacity to deal with. So, and we've literally just had 2 weeks ago run some training with which 75 staff from across the council attended to support with those lower contracts. So yeah, lots going on.
Are there any more questions? Any comments on this report? Yes, Councillor Sawyer.
Yeah, thanks, the whole team really. I mean, I think it's a balanced report because it recognises that where we've come from and what we've still to do. So that's a good thing. I want to just refer to a very specific page, which is 352 in the pack, which is the Improvement Plan Governance Framework. Now, whilst, if you like, I accept this is very specific, this is about the governance of the improvement plan, which is a part of the council's processes. I just want to make the point that if we were to try to produce this or more generally in terms of the governance of the council, and I actually think we should, I would very much recommend that the Audit Committee and the OSCs are separated because they perform quite a different function. And in fact, it's an ongoing effort to actually be trying to provide some clarity about what the difference between those committees are. So if we do it separately, if we do it again rather, or if we use a similar diagram perhaps in a slightly different context, I would expect the Audit Committee to have its own box, if you like, and probably report in to both Council and the Executive in more general terms. If you're interested, I could probably dig up some diagrams that might demonstrate this more clearly, but I haven't got them with me tonight.
Any more comments? No? Okay, recommendation that the committee is invited to consider the draft 2025-2026 annual governance statement at the Appendix A. Seek clarification and, if satisfied, recommend the annual governance statement to the Mayor for approval. Is this agreed? Yeah, thank you. Right, we move to Agenda 15, Annual Report 2025-2026, Financial Administration of the Council. Please could I ask Julie McCabe, Executive Director of Resources, to provide her presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is the annual report that I bring on the arrangements. The arrangements have not substantially changed from the previous financial year. The bits that I would highlight is there have been some changes in compliance with the Financial Management Code, which is shown in Appendix B, which is on page 402 of the pack. And that's reflective of some of the comments that have been made in the SIPFA resilience review, that we do need to do some more training, we need to look at some of our policies. So we have moved some of those items from green to amber. So I take the report as read. I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions on this? No? Are there any comments on this report? No? Okay, recommendation. The committee is invited to consider the report, seek clarification and satisfy itself as to the adequacy of the current arrangements for the proper financial administration of the Council. Is this agreed? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Now we move to the agenda item 16. Agenda item 16, Committee Work Plan 2026-2027. Are there any questions? Yes, Mr. Harris.
I think it's just for completeness, given what Richard said about KPMG's items, that just to note that it's not obviously referenced in here, probably because of where KPMG have been in their reporting, but I think we'd probably be expecting a KPMG update at that 9th of September meeting on build back and value for money.
Sorry. So just to be clear, I agree with what Mr. Harris just said. I think this will wait till September, and I think we need to revisit this at September and understand with the finance team about where we are. But I think we need to be clear when you look at this plan in September, what are we taking in November about the accounts? Because the accounts deadline is over 2 months after this, the committee in November. And so at the moment there is the annual auditor's report, which is, as I referred to earlier, I need to do an annual report at the end of November. That will just be where we are at the state of the audit. So if the audit's still ongoing and we still have a lot of work to do to finalise things, that is all I'll say then. I will still then need to report my findings of the audit in an ISO 260 report. I will endeavour to get this to that committee in November, but I just wanted to mention now that that is 2 months ahead of the deadline, and the last 2 years we've issued the opinion very close to the end of the deadline, and that was in February. So I just think the timing of the committees, I don't know whether you need to consider having another one in January or just before Christmas, but at the moment this plan, that's the big gap for me, in that when are we actually going to finalise the accounts? But we can decide that in September, or you can discuss it as you wish.
Any more? Yes, Mr. Harris.
Can I just endorse what Richard said, because I do think the statement of accounts, given what we've just talked about and how comprehensive that is, and the AGS and all the work around value for money, that that I do think we need to give serious consideration to a special meeting of the Audit Committee as late as you can in January, so you've got full picture from both KPMG and the officers, so that we can make an informed decision as an Audit Committee on whether we're approving the accounts and authorising them for issue. So I would definitely agree, I'd definitely endorse what Richard's saying, and if we can put that into the work plan and this committee can agree to that, I would strongly recommend that.
Any recommendations from anyone else on this?
Can I just, so there is a committee meeting.
Yes, Surinder.
Yeah, we do have a committee meeting scheduled on the 26th of January, provisionally to that we can take the accounts on that meeting.
Yes, Councillor Sawyer, you wanted to say something?
A comment. So without wishing to add to the burdens placed on this committee, and without prejudice to the success or otherwise of the private meeting we're about to have, could I suggest that we schedule in the work plan 2 of these private meetings per annum? I realise the minimum recommendation, I believe, is 1 per year, but given the difficulties the council's facing and the importance of particularly having the opportunity to talk to KPMG, can I recommend we schedule in, we put 2 into the work plan. Obviously, if we don't need them, we can always cancel them, but let's put 2 in the work plan.
Right. Any more comments on this? Yes, Councillor Simon.
I'll just second Councillor Sawyer's recommendation for a change to the work programme. That's a very sensible idea.
Didn't hear you, what did you say?
Sorry, I just said I'll second Councillor Sawyer's suggestion that we have a second private meeting per year with KPMG. I think it's a very sensible idea. So if that's a formal proposal, I'll second it.
Are we all agreed to that one? Yeah? Okay. Are you agreed to this?
Happy to meet with you whenever you wish.
Right. Thank you. So what do we need? We said right. We move to the agenda item 17, Local Government Act 1972, exclusion of the public. So I don't think there's any public around here now. And there's no one yet. Right, so is this agreed? I mean, the Local Government Act 1972, exclusion of the public share, to consider whether to pass a resolution under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 to exclude the public from the remainder of the meeting on the grounds that consideration of the following item of the business is likely to be involved: the disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of the part 1 of schedule 12A to the Act. Is this agreed? Yeah, thank you. Right.
Sorry, Chair, I'm just going to have to, if I could butt in, I need to give apologies because I've got to go now. But sorry, but I'm going to have to leave, so I just want to give my apologies to you and to the committee, but I can't stay any longer. Just because it's 9 o'clock and I've got somewhere else to be, I'm afraid.